welcome to Resource Stage. My name is Carl, and thanks for coming along tonight. I think it sounds like we've got a good number of people who are actually interested in this topic. There's a bunch of people who are who said that they're going to watch online. So thanks for coming, and thanks for putting up with the fact that we had to reschedule this week. That was a last minute. We were going through and looking at the calendar, and then all of a sudden, I realized that I was going to be in Montreal last week when I was supposed to be here teaching this, and that wouldn't have gone over very well. So tonight we're talking about a topic that we've never really discussed before, and that is accessibility solutions, or most specifically, we're going to be talking about assistive listening. But we're going to be talking a little bit about accessibility in general. And I think that we might actually, Logan, do we have the closed caption stuff running tonight? Or is that working? Yeah, there we go. So we thought we'd play around with this just kind of to go along with the topic of the evening. And this is actually just Microsoft's built-in closed or live captioning running on the computer through PowerPoint. It costs nothing if you own a Microsoft 365 account. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to start tonight, because accessibility and adding a little bit of accessibility to your events or to your church services doesn't have to cost a ton of money to be able to add a small piece and to potentially provide a little bit of extra support to people. Now, is this perfect? No, it's absolutely not perfect. There's some things that are a little bit funky about this, but the price is right. We can also show you solutions that cost you, they could cost you $1,000 a month if you want to look at that are more accurate and faster. So we're talking about accessibility solutions, and the first question that comes to mind is why? Why are we doing this? Took a look at some of the numbers, and there are a lot of numbers online, and the numbers, of course, you look at some stuff is from 2015, some stuff is from 2022. I was looking at something earlier on tonight, it's from 2019. This appears to be from 2015. Approximately 3.57 million people in Canada have hearing loss of some sort. And I read something else that suggested that only less than 50% of those people are doing something about it. Research from Canadian Hearing Services and Statistics Canada indicates that 77% of seniors aged 60 to 69 experience hearing loss, with this percentage increasing to 94% for those 70 to 79, and then it goes up from there. And it is pretty interesting when you do look at the numbers and how people often don't do anything about it for different types of reasons. And of course, the demographic for many of our theater clients and our church clients is getting older, right? Always does. I was thinking about it, and if I were being perfectly honest, I'm positive that I have some level of hearing loss. I'm positive that my hearing is not the way that it was in the past. I'm holding, if you've spent any time around Horizon Solutions, you will know that cassette tapes kind of hold a place in my heart. And if you're not sure what I mean by that, then grab one of us on your way out the door tonight, and we can take you and show you our cassette wall in our meeting room with over 2,000 cassettes hanging in there. When I was a kid, we lived across the country, and we would drive back and forth. And I had a Walkman, and I would listen to my Walkman hours on end with my head against the window in the car, right? And it would buzz constantly as I was listening to stuff. And I'm positive that had an effect on my hearing. And I'm pretty sure that if we're all honest, to some level, we're not hearing things exactly the same way as we did when we were younger. Whether that's, driving with the window down for hours, or whether that's working in some spot where, you're working around a certain type of machinery or something like that, it definitely is happening. So the use of and the need for some sort of assistive listening is growing, and there's all kinds of reasons why people might use it. So what does accessibility mean? Well, there's a lot of different definitions, and you can talk to ChatGPT or whoever about this, but Accessibility Services Canada says accessibility refers to the design of products, devices, and services, or environments, so spaces, for people who experience disabilities. Ontario has laws to improve accessibility for people with disabilities, including Accessibility for Ontarios with Disabilities Act, and the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Ontario Building Code, which we'll talk about in a minute. So what does accessibility mean for events and services? What do you think? What does that mean? Often the first thing that comes to mind is accessibility means I need a really big bathroom in my building. Or it might mean that I need an elevator to get somebody. But what does it mean for events? Any ideas? Yeah, there we go. We're not even talking about any of that tonight, but absolutely, intelligibility is big. Somebody earlier on mentioned microphones. You know, how good is the microphone that you're capturing? How good is the speaker system that you've got in your room? What are the acoustics in the space? Are the acoustics in your space such that people can't hear? Those are absolutely important pieces before we get talking about any of the stuff I've got here up here tonight. Scott? Absolutely mobility through the space. So that, from our perspective, means what are we doing when are we taping down cables properly? Are we leaving space so that people can move through if we're setting up our gear in different spaces? That kind of thing, and thinking about that. Yes, there are the pieces that lots of people think about, like the washrooms and the elevators and that kind of stuff, but thinking specifically on the event side of things, how are we thinking about that as we're doing it? And absolutely, it's stuff that we have to think about all the way through, all pieces. And that includes, if you're doing a temporary event, how are people getting onto the stage if they need to, right? So, again, we do sell stages and we do build stages and that kind of stuff, and we consider those things. But tonight we're mostly talking about assistive listening and what does that look like. So, I got a disclaimer for you. As you will often find at Resource Stage, we give a certain level of disclaimers here at Horizon. The first one is we're not experts in government regulations or accessibility standards. We're just not. That's not our expertise. There's lots of conflicting information online. And not all provinces have the same rules, which is some of the conflicting information. So some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, or some of the things that you might find from some manufacturers, they make some statements about what might be regulations, what might be standards, and they are not necessarily 100% standards in Ontario. Okay, so that's something to think about. But we also know that sometimes people are watching online from different provinces, and you should really figure out what is going on in your province before you take anything I say tonight as 100% gospel. The other thing is that the minimum shouldn't necessarily be your guide. It should not necessarily be what your goal is all the time. Looking for what can you be doing for the future. And again, as I said in one of the promotional things that we were shooting for this tonight, it's you and me, right? Like, it's not necessarily that we're trying to find a hearing assist solution for somebody else all the time. We're often the person, or we will be the person who needs that. So what does it mean for events and services? Well, if we look at the Ontario Building Code, and this is based on the 2024 update, there are three pieces that are kind of interesting here. First of all, the building code in this one, on the one sentence, requires buildings with the assembly occupancies with an area of more than 100 meters squared. I did the math for you. Approximately 1,075 square feet, to be equipped with assistive listening system. Or, if it's easier for you to figure that out, by saying 100 to 130 people seated in theater seating or church seating. That's not a very big space. I'm guessing that everybody here is probably working in a space that's at least that size, which means that by Ontario Building Code, you should have some sort of assisted listening system in your space. Second sentence of interest, at least one service counter in an assembly occupancy building is required to be equipped with the assistive listening system or adaptive technologies in each location where information, goods, or services are provided to the public. So what that means is that if you have a ticket booth at your community theater, you're supposed to have some sort of assistive listening option there. If you sell Snickers during the intermission, you're supposed to have something there as well. If you have a welcome desk in your church, or maybe somewhere where kids and their families come in to register for their kids' church program, you're supposed to have something there. It's interesting, eh? This is what the building code is saying. Another one, assistive listening systems or adaptive technology must provide oh boy, reading is not my strong suit. Must provide, this is why I eat 4 cookies before we start. Must provide amplification system for clear communication. So this goes back to, as Stephen said, having intelligibility in the space, but it also means that a hearing assist system needs to be one that can actually be heard and can actually work really well. Maybe not like this, guys. Okay? So we're going to talk about a bunch of different technologies tonight, and we are going to look at some of the ones that are a little bit older, some of the ones that are very new, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the differences are between some of these and why you might want to go with one or the other. We're going to start with an FM transmitter. People familiar with this? Yeah? Okay, cool. This is probably the one that most of our clients have, most of our church clients for sure, and it is some sort of a transmitter that you put audio into, typically from your mixer, and you're typically feeding that with a line that would be very similar to that going to the main speakers in your church or in your theater. It may also be slightly different. It might be what's going to your live stream or going to your recording, because it probably has a little bit better mix of the band and the other things that are going on in the room. Sometimes it's a completely different mix. It depends. But this kind of thing is pretty standard. We've been selling these for, I'm pretty sure 30 years. Don could tell you, but I'm pretty sure 30 years or more. And when I came here to Horizon almost 20 years ago, this was the one we sold. This is the Telux SR50, and Telux sold a bazillion of these under the brand SoundMate. And they work the same way that pretty much all the FM systems work, and they use a designated frequency that is designated by the government to use so that theoretically you don't have interference. Okay? This is a good solution. This solution is cited in different levels of government for your assistive listening systems all across. And it works pretty well. It is essentially a radio station, right? We have a base station with a really sweet looking antenna here. And there are, of course, different antenna options, and we can remote these antennas and that kind of thing. But you have an antenna, and then you have a bunch of belt packs that you can hear from. Okay? And this works pretty well. I'm going to give you an example of how this works. You can see that we're actually transmitting audio if you can see that there, you can see that we're transmitting audio to the transmitter, or sending audio to the transmitter. And so I'm going to bring up the volume on this a little bit.
And the radial or sectoral horn.
And so that's actually being transmitted right now. And this is what you would hear if you were listening to a pair of headphones plugged into this.
The folded horn for low frequencies.
Okay.
Stereophonic sound and the
I don't know if we're going to hear it so much tonight, but if I move around a little bit, then it's, it's a radio station.
Generation of the necessary system approaches.
It's going to change
a little bit. Techniques
and it's also,
and practices,
as I turn it up in volume, you can hear that it starts to distort a little bit and that kind of thing, because it's a radio station. It's also in the 72 megahertz range, so it's not necessarily in that really sweet radio station range. Okay, so that's FM. It's pretty simple. Because it's a radio station, you can just keep adding more and more belt packs to that. Make sense? How about this? That is a brand new transmitter. This is a belt pack that we sold probably 20 years ago from a completely different manufacturer because it's just a radio station and I can continue to use these. I can use the Williams sound one that came with it, or I can use the Telex one with it. It's pretty handy and it's pretty bulletproof, and it means that I can build out my system and it just works. If you want to do multiple translations, or if you need to have something slightly different, you can stack these, have multiples of them, and people just tune into different frequencies and they can hear one is French, one is English, one is Korean, whatever it might be. Works out pretty well, okay? That's FM. Just to run through this really quickly again, it's like a private radio station. They're government-regulated frequencies, so you don't have to worry about other things kind of tromping in on it. The most common frequency band that we use for most of our clients is 72 to 76 megahertz. It's often typically used for indoor and portable uses. If you're doing a bigger space, then 216 to 217, like arenas, if you're wanting to do something like that with FM, then you could do that. The quality varies. You can have one transmitter that's really good, and then you can have different receivers in like many things. You know, that receiver is going to have an impact on how good that sound quality is. And it's not so private. I mean, it's your private radio station, but as you can tell, anybody who comes along can listen to what's going on. Now, you may not care about that in your church, but you might care about that a little bit more in your theater where people are paying to hear this person sing, right? That might be more important. So you may want to consider that, okay? Because the walls are not necessarily going to keep in whatever that broadcast is. Again, great for a church application, not so great necessarily if you're trying to keep that information in. Oh, and it's relatively inexpensive to implement. Pretty inexpensive. Let's talk about infrared or IR transmission. Has anybody used this before? Anybody in the room? No? Okay. So the way this works is it is infrared. So if you are, sitting at home on the couch and you're flipping TV and you're using your infrared remote, that's using a light pulse to tell the TV to change the channel or change the volume, that kind of thing. It's using the same sort of thing, only it's sending high quality audio from an emitter, which is that black box there, that thing that says Sennheiser on it. And then all the people in the audience who would like to be able to listen in are wearing this kind of funky stethoscope thing hanging from their head, which works quite well if you are in line of sight to the emitter, because as long as the thing I'm wearing around my neck or around my head can see the emitter, then I'm going to get really good sound from that. As soon as I'm outside of the room, or if I turn, it will bounce off the walls a bit, but as soon as I'm outside of the room, then it gets cut off. Does that make sense? One of the biggest manufacturers in this industry, or in this part of the industry for infrared in our theater clients projects, was Sennheiser. And they've pretty much gotten out of it completely. So people like the Grand Theater here in town and a number of other professional theaters, that's the system that they had. And a lot of them have been pulled out because they can't even get parts for them anymore. That technology is changing is disappearing fairly quickly. But again, one of the benefits of it is that it is a rather analog technology that has a fair amount of privacy to it. Does that make sense? Okay. And the sound quality is actually pretty good. So uses light to transmit audio, line of sight transmission for better or worse, high quality, and low latency. Very low latency. And it's private. And it's relatively inexpensive to implement for the most part, in part because you can put up a couple of emitters and you don't have to run a whole bunch of wires all over the place or anything like that. Okay? That's foreshadowing. That's what that one is. Okay. Inductive loop. Let's talk about inductive loop for a second. Speaking of expensive. Have anybody here ever used an inductive loop before? Have you ever experienced an inductive loop before? Okay. So if you do a little bit of research online and you start taking a look, you start talking to some of the audiologists around, that kind of stuff, they will tell you, especially if you look at any publications from, let's say, 2020 and before, especially 2015 and before, the solution that many people will suggest is an inductive loop. And an inductive loop kind of works like this. First of all, well, actually here, let me go through a couple things first. Okay. It uses a magnetic inductive loop designed back in the 1930s. This is not brand new technology. It's intended in its simplest form to work like with a telephone. So if you came in this evening and you talked to Jordan at the front desk, you may have noticed that we have an old rotary telephone sitting at the front desk. That telephone, when you would pick it up, and the big magnet that's in the speaker side, you'd put that up against your head, and then that would actually work with the hearing aid that you're wearing. If it is if it has a T-coil in it, sorry, that was the word I was looking for, Don. If it has a T-coil in it, then that magnet will work with the T-coil, and it'll amplify the sound from the phone right into your hearing aid. Pretty cool. Pretty simple technology that's been around for quite a while. In the 1970s, they started to implement this into public venues. And what this would do is you would do something like this. You would take a room and you would put an electrical wire all the way around the room so that anybody that was within that space, if they were wearing a hearing aid that had a T-coil in it, then it would amplify the signal within their hearing aid. It's pretty magical. You walk into the room and now it's amplified to your hearing aid. It's pretty cool. You walk out of the room. Now, I mean, there's a little bit on the edge, but once you walk out of the room, then you don't hear it anymore. So a certain level of privacy, good quality sound most of the time, right? And this idea that you as a user don't need to pick up one of these and put it on your belt or put it in your purse or whatever and then put on headphones. Now, I'm already wearing my hearing aid. I can just walk into the space and it just happens. Newer hearing aids, you can hit the mode button and it would turn on. I'm saying this like I'm an expert. I read such things. You can put the mode on for T-coil, and now your hearing aid works. Okay, it's pretty simple. And people, this picture came from Canadian Audiologists, the magazine for Canadian Economy or Canadian Academy of Audiology, and this is definitely a technology that a significant number of the professionals in the industry are saying this is what you should do. And it's great. It really is. It works very, very well. This is another piece of that. And I already mentioned this earlier on. You're going to go up there and you're going to buy that Snickers. You stand up to the counter and you want to pay. You're interacting with the person there. Or you're going to pay for tickets, right? This ability to be able to walk up to there and have a conversation with the person at the other side. Well, that can be accomplished with an inductive loop system. We had the privilege to work very closely with the Stratford Festival when they were building the new Tom Patterson Theatre. And there are designated locations where when you go up to buy your tickets, that when you stand close to that window, then you're able to, with your T-coil enabled hearing aid, to be able to communicate with the person on the other side of the window. And it works very well. Let's take a look at this. So we are going to try to give you an idea as to how this works using some technology that we have here. This is not a perfect way of showing this, because the device that we have, I couldn't give everybody a hearing aid tonight, but the device, and it's hard to show that on live stream. But the device that we have is actually designed for testing inductive loop systems. And it's to allow you to walk a space that you've installed an inductive loop and give you the ability to hear what's the coverage like. Because depending on the space, an inductive loop system requires not just a loop around the outside of the room, but it also may require smaller loops within the room to ensure saturation throughout the whole space. Does that make sense? Right? It also, you have to be considering things like, well, what if the walls in my space are built with steel studs? Or what if there is, how deep is the rebar in the floor? Or what if there are, running down the walls in this old church, what if there's radiators and the steel from that? How is that going to affect things? Okay? So this is a tool that you can use for walking around and checking things out. So theoretically, this little loop system that we have right here is going to give off, it's going to kind of creates a small inductive loop in the area around it. And so let's see if this little experiment will work. So I'm going to just turn this up a little bit, and we should be able to hear this through the speaker. Okay? And just so I'm not touching the volume control, and nobody else, stop touching the volume control. Oh, the song stopped. Cool, eh? Okay? So that's the kind of thing that's happening when somebody uses an inductive loop, that they just step into the room and the sound is there. Okay? Some of the experiments that we're kind of showing you tonight, or some of the things that we're showing you are, I wouldn't say cobbled together, but we've had to kind of do a couple of things tonight, like use a device that's not really intended for what we're showing you, to be able to kind of give you a bit of an indication. And they don't work exactly the way a hearing aid would work, but it gives you a bit of an idea. Okay? Is that cool? All right, we're going to come back to inductive loop in a couple of minutes, but that's a start on that. Does anybody have any questions about inductive loops? Oh, you're jumping ahead. Yeah, so the question for those online is there an inductive loop option for going around your head? And we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes, okay? But thank you. All right, so to quickly go over this, or to follow this up, one of the things about inductive loops is that you have to have a T-Coil enabled hearing aid. I don't know about you, but as much as I think it would be really cool, I don't have one of those rotary phones at home. So therefore, there's less and less need for people to have that T-Coil. And although, depending on which article you're reading, somewhere between 50 and 75% of hearing aids are compatible with inductive loops. And those numbers, again, like I've heard some people say it's about 2/3. I've heard some people say that it's closer to 75%. I don't know. I do know that I did a really quick search, and I started searching things like, what are the top brands of hearing aids today? What are the top models? You know, that kind of thing. And I did some of those searches, and then I started looking at them and saying, well, does that model have a T-Coil? No. Does this one have? No. Does this one? Yes. Does this one? Yes, if you buy it this way. You know, that kind of thing. So it seems that less and less of these devices have those. We have been doing a very little bit of work with the Center for Audiology at Western recently, and we've been having some conversations about a different technology we're going to talk about later. And that's one of their concerns, is they're saying less and less people have T-Coils in their hearing aids, so we need to be considering what does that look like. Interestingly enough, the government's doubling down on the use of inductive loops, and not everybody is the ability to use them. That doesn't sound like... Anyway, okay. Okay, let's talk about another technology, Wi-Fi. So this is an interesting one. If you talked to us 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and said, show me the most cutting edge technology for hearing assist, we would have said, we should talk to you about Wi-Fi. Because a company like Williams AV that builds this FM transmitter is building this same transmitter to have the same inputs and has the guts in it with a network jack on it, so that now we can connect this to a building network or to a dedicated network specifically for hearing assist. And this is kind of interesting because what this means is that I have a transmitter that sits in a rack somewhere, and then I have my phone, and I can pull out my phone and I can connect to that restaurant, or I can connect to that gym that I go to, or I can connect to wherever it is, and I can then log in and go, oh, I'm going to listen to that, or I'm on the treadmill and I'm going to listen to the ball game in Spanish instead of in English. Okay? It's pretty cool. It actually works quite well. And there's some really neat things that you can do with that. And for the last, I would say, like for a period of time there, I don't know, Dawn, about 3-4 years, something like that. Was it maybe a bit longer? Something of that sort. We were all saying, this is it. Wi-Fi. This is going to be great. And people would say, but what about latency? And what about how do I get people online? And what about if I'm trying to figure it out and I got my phone there and I want to listen to something and I want to keep it to be low latency, but some other bozo is streaming Netflix. And it's messing up all the bandwidth on the network. And we go, yeah, we can take care of that if we put the time into building the network properly. Absolutely true. I'm not making that up. It is absolutely true. We can use a wireless network infrastructure to do this. Now, are we going to go out and buy the latest, cheapest router that you can buy at Staples? If you have ever been to a Horizon resource stage before, you already know the answer is no. That's not what we're going to suggest you do. It requires an app. So every one of these devices has a different app. So if you're going to use the Williams AV one, that has a specific app. If you're going to use a Listen Technologies one, different app. Different manufacturer, different app. In fact, sometimes within the same brand, you might have a different app based on what they're doing. Now, that's not the end of the world. I can walk up and I can scan with my QR code while I'm checking in, and I'm good to go. Or if I'm going into the movie theater, I can scan and I can get the right app, and I can get automatically onto that network that is specific for that. And as I said, we can manipulate the network in such a way to make sure that Scott has enough bandwidth to be able to download the app, but he doesn't have enough bandwidth to watch the latest resource stage seminar on YouTube. Because if he does, it'll just kind of slow things down. It'll kill his stream, and he'll get annoyed, and he'll go back to what he's actually supposed to be using that network for, or he'll jump off the network and do it on there. Okay? So we can manipulate it to do it. It's relatively secure. You get to decide who gets access to your network. You can password protect it, so that can work out really well. It's high quality, but the latency's higher. And in some situations, we can get that latency pretty good, like quite good, with the right equipment. But if we're all on it, and then another, 15 people all get on it, and another 15 people, then eventually we're going to get to the point where we're saturating our network. And now we require somebody who knows networking to be able to implement this. Remember this one where we just dropped it on the desk and we pulled up the antenna? And then just hand out these things? That seems rather easy, rather than apps and network, bringing in a network expert and all that other kind of stuff, right? So the Wi-Fi thing is really cool, but it has some hurdles, especially for certain people in the demographic who need to use assistive listening. Now, I could tell you that there's some people in my family who would have no problem with that. And there are some people in my family who would really have a problem with that. I don't know what your family's like, but that's the fact. And because of the security part, it's pretty private. It'd be difficult for people to get on there unless, like as much as any Wi-Fi network. But it is harder to implement than people think. Because again, people think, well, I could just go and do this. And it's going to work out fine. And honestly, if you are in a country church in the middle of nowhere and there's 4 people who are using it, then maybe you can get away with that, spend $150 on a Linksys router. Maybe you can. But I'm not going to tell you can. And I'm also not going to suggest, we're not going to sell it to you that way. Okay? And it same sort of thing. It's costly when implemented correctly. Let's talk about accessories for a second, because a lot of the accessories flow through for each of these different types of technologies. The first accessory is probably one of the most important because this accessory is required by law. And that is some sort of a sign saying that assistive listening is available, because you need to be able to tell people that they can get that and that those options are there. The simplest version, if you buy any kit from any of these manufacturers, then they're going to give you a sign in the box so that you can put that up. Or in the case of this piece, it actually has the signage kind of right on it so that you can see that there's assistive listening available. And actually, I don't know if you noticed earlier on when we went to the inductive loop slide and the image that was there, and it showed kind of the same ear image, but it had a little T beside it. This has that. That's to indicate that it works with a telecoil. Okay? So assistive listening signage, not expensive. You can print it out on your printer, but it is important to have. Okay? Some of the most basic things are just regular headphones. Stereo headphones, mono headphones, doesn't really matter. Many of these systems are only in mono. Some of the systems are in stereo. This is probably a good time to point out that the sound quality for these systems is often not focused around 20 to 20. We talk about 20 hertz to 20 megahertz. Often these systems aren't designed to do that, because what I'm typically using a system like this for is, again, we're coming back to Steve mentioned, intelligibility and the frequencies that we need to be able to hear speech, right? That kind of thing. So they don't always have to be the best headphones in the world as long as they're flat within the frequency range that's important, okay? Now, headphones are great, but headphones also some people feel like that makes me stand out like a sore thumb, which, again, may or may not matter to you. It depends on who you are, right? Again, good for touring a space, good for maybe for translation, where there's a lot of people using translation, so everybody kind of feels like it's okay. There are, of course, the traditional earbuds, which some people have those. They can be rather discreet. They can plug into these belt packs, and you keep them in your pocket. You walk in, plug it in, stick it in. It's nice and discreet and clean and simple. You may not want to share them. There's a couple different manufacturers have different names for these, but these are essentially probably the best description would be an ear speaker. So it's kind of like headphones, only it just slides over your ear, kind of hangs on your ear, and it's on one side and plugs in. Now, these, like headphones, are usually best if you're not wearing a hearing aid already, because now I've got something like this that I can put on, but if I've got a hearing aid, then I probably have to take the hearing aid off. And so then I'm fumbling to put this on and taking that off and that kind of stuff. We sell quite a few of these, actually, because they're good if you're kind of in between. I don't need a hearing aid, but I can't really hear what the pastor's saying as well. So I'm gonna use one of these. And it's also kind of discreet because it's only on one ear. I can also hear the rest of what's going on in the room and the ambience in the room and that kind of stuff. Some people in a church application will leave this off and only put it on when there's speech. Okay? Again, just basically making things louder. So then that brings us to the inductive loop around your neck that was already asked about. So let's try this. I have two different versions of that here tonight, and they are exactly what they sound like. So this plugs into the belt pack like this one. Plugs into the belt pack, and then I can just put that around my head. And when I do that, then I'm actually it's kind of cool because I can put that around my head, and then I can it excites the T-coil in my hearing aid, and I can walk around with that wherever I'm going, and I don't need the inductive loop in the entire building. But it has the benefit of FM in that I can walk out into the foyer or the lobby, and I'm still hearing everything that's being broadcast. But I'm not wearing headphones. So it's kind of a best of both worlds. Does that make sense? And the personal inductive loop can work quite well. There's a few different versions of it. So this one is from Williams. This one is from Listen. But again, different manufacturers do different types of things. I have this one plugged in right now into the old FM transmitter. And I'm just going to turn the volume up on that a little bit. So theoretically, this is creating a little inductive loop right here. I'm going to go back to my device here that, remember, we were using this for testing the inductive loop over there. And theoretically,
long-term effects of what they were constructing.
Isn't that fun?
Indeed,
it's like
the
magic.
most lasting piece of technology from their period is
cool, eh? Yeah. If any of you were here for the lighting seminar we did like a month ago and all of my demonstrations didn't work, this is pretty great. So anyway, yeah, so
speaker.
It's pretty cool. So that's an inductive loop. Okay? Good? Any questions? Yes, sir.
How, like, your ears are there, but the loop's around your neck, is that going to be close enough?
Yes. Yeah. If it's around your neck with that, it works quite well. Yeah, and we've had really, really good results with that. And so that piece in a system that's built on an FM system like this is not only cost effective because it's relatively easy to implement. You know, this can take as little as a half an hour, as long as a couple of hours, maybe 4 hours if you're installing an antenna up in an attic or something like that in a larger space. But it doesn't have to take a long time, and then from there you can build on it. So we have some clients, some schools, some community theaters where they say, you know what? We know that the minimum requirements is for us to have just a couple of belt packs. So we're going to do that, and then over time we'll buy more belt packs, and then we'll buy the headsets that we see that people are asking for, or the loops that people are asking for. And maybe you start with, very common would be a couple of these ear speaker things and a couple of the loop things, and you start with that, and then you see kind of how people are using it, and then you build it out from there. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. What else do we have for accessible? For accessories. That's basically the same thing. There are different kinds of antennas. Essentially, it comes down to how much area do we need to cover. And there's a number of things about that. And what we have found the hard way after 40 years of installing sound systems is you got to be careful where you put that antenna, because sometimes that can just create lots of problems. Okay, and sometimes it's not as obvious where you're going to put that antenna. And then now, because our entire industry is going this direction, thankfully, we can use rechargeable batteries for a lot of these, which works out really, really great. Because again, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when we were selling systems like this, you'd be going through batteries like crazy, and a couple of AA's isn't so bad, but some of the older systems might have used 9 volts, and you're going through them like crazy. Now, we're just dropping stuff in chargers. People people get used to it, right? Every Sunday, they walk into church, they grab their belt pack. We have some church clients who say people will buy their own inductive loops. They put it on with their clothes to go to church. It's there. They've got the plug in their pocket. They walk into church. They grab the belt pack, plug it in, sit down. Right? Earbuds, whatever it might be. So it becomes just part of what's going on, and then again, it just gets dropped into the charger, and that works really, really well. So then comes the question that a lot of people call us and ask us about. Now, we get questions about Bluetooth on a monthly basis, if not a weekly basis, where people say, hey, I need a new wireless microphone. I was thinking about buying Bluetooth. Hey, I'm thinking about, I need to get this. Can I use Bluetooth? Can I send video from my computer to my projector? Can I use Bluetooth? And what we've come to realize is they don't actually mean Bluetooth at all. It's just that's just the words, right? That's kind of the terminology. Bluetooth as a technology works quite well to go from my phone to my earbuds. It works pretty well between my phone and my car. I say pretty well because it feels like on a weekly basis something drops out when I'm driving down the road. It's a consumer technology. It's designed to work most of the time and to be relatively easy for most people to make it work. You know, I have to figure out how to hit the pairing button, hold the pairing button until it starts flashing some sort of thing, and then I scan and I found the thing, and then I go to the thing, and then I've got things, and this thing that plays with this thing, and it works, right? Theoretically. Bluetooth as a technology is typically, in most applications that most people are doing today, is a one-to-one device. You're going from one phone to one pair of earbuds or to one car or what have you. Now, I can pair my earbuds to my computer and my phone so that if I go on a Teams call, then I can use that, and then when I pick up my phone, I can do that. That I can do. There are some rules that you can kind of go around because of the later versions of Bluetooth, but it's still designed to be a personal technology. Does that make sense? It's also designed to really only work around around 10 meters. 30 feet-ish, give or take. That's really what the whole thing. It requires individual pairing. I already said that, right? Close proximity. I already said that. Consumer technology. And we kind of beat this like crazy because it really is. It's a consumer technology. So if you're going to use it, just remember that. We have Bluetooth devices that can plug into mixers, into soundboards. We got mixers that have Bluetooth built into them. We sell speakers that have Bluetooth built into them. We've got all of those, but it's intended to be consumer technology from this device to this device, and it can work quite well. Phone to hearing aid. That is an interesting thing. So, I said that T-Coils are disappearing from hearing aids, right? Because, I don't know about you, but almost everybody that I know that has a hearing aid has connected their hearing aid to their Bluetooth through their phone. So that means that, I know contractors who wear hearing aids, and they'll be walking around on the job site talking to people, and they got their hard hat on and everything else, and they're just using their hearing aid. Their phone doesn't leave their pocket for the day because they're talking that way. But it's hearing aid to their phone, just like they were earbuds, right? Often, if you're doing something where I'm going to sit on the couch and I'm going to connect to the TV, many, not necessarily all, but many hearing aids are still connecting through another device. They're still connecting through a phone. They still require that connection. We recently went through a thing with one of the professional theaters in the area where they have, surprise, surprise, a group of technicians who, for different reasons, are saying they need to be able to have a hearing aid of some sort for communications. They're being told, okay, go on that cue, and they're not necessarily fully hearing it, especially when it's in a quiet theater and they've got headphones on, they've got their comm systems on, and they can't necessarily hear it. And there's things happening. Like, we're talking about people who are flying in sets, people who are hitting go on consoles, that kind of thing. And we're trying to find ways to make this work, and this is becoming a big issue, because what's happening is that in order to connect to a belt pack for comm, you actually have to go from hearing aid to phone to belt pack to comm. And that's creating a level of latency that's too much of a level of latency for a theater show that's going like this. It's a musical, and you've got all kinds of cues. Go, 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 go. And if there's that level of latency, then, oh, wait. Was that 3 times or 2 times that I'm supposed to be going? Or 6? How many times am I supposed to be going? It's an issue. So, Bluetooth can work, but again, consumer technology. It's not designed to do some of the things that we want it to do. Is this making sense? Okay, cool. Oh, and latency varies greatly. The latency between my phone and my car versus my phone and our van is different. I know it's different. I press stop on the one and it stops and the other one takes a second. That kind of thing. So, enter this thing called Auracast. Anybody here heard about Auracast before? Yes? A little bit about Auracast? A little bit? Okay. So I've heard different things. The one thing I heard was back in 2013, a group of companies who build hearing aids got together, went to Bluetooth, to the Bluetooth organization, and said, can you guys build us a technology that will work better for hearing aids, that will make it so that hearing aids, it's easier for people to connect, and that it will make it simpler for people to be able to live with hearing aids around this type of technology. And that grew from there. And what it's become is kind of a different sort of an animal. We have 2 different Auracast devices here. This one's from Listen Technologies. This one's from Opus. And we're going to show you kind of what the differences are there. And this is the part of tonight that might sound a little more sales pitchy. And I don't mean that to be the case, but I'm warning you going into it, okay? Is that fair? All right. This is very, very, very new. And it's been around for maybe 2 years. Most of this technology was released at like about 18 months ago, to like as far as the first initial showing of how it worked, okay? The way that Auracast works is that the idea is that now it is broadcasting in a large area, and now anybody with an Auracast pair of headphones or hearing aids that are Auracast enabled can automatically connect to this. So it's like Bluetooth, only it is one-to-many instead of one-to-one. It's also pretty low latency, and it's also pretty high quality, okay? Auracast is one-to-many and unlimited, so kind of like the best of this, right? 100-meter range. That is when you're doing one of the professional versions, and we'll talk about that in a second, but 100 meters. Okay? Multiple streams at once. This device right here can stream 2 streams at the same time. Okay? This one over here can stream 1. If I want to have multiples of these, I can cascade them and put multiples into a space. And there's no issues with, it's not like I can't put 2 of these in a space and they start conflicting with each other, that kind of thing. That's not the way this works. Okay? I can also set up this one in here and set up another one on the other side of the building, and as you're walking between the 2, then there will be a handoff between your Auracast receiver device. Okay? No specific apps in theory, and we're going to come back to that in a second. Theoretically, as this gets implemented further by different manufacturers, it's going to show up on your phone like Wi-Fi or like Bluetooth. So theoretically, when I pull up my phone and I say, scan for Bluetooth devices or scan for Wi-Fi, I'm going to have an option for scan for Auracast, and I'll be able to find that. I say will be able to because there are some phones on the market that can do it, but they're not the mainline phones that you probably have in your pocket right now. And guaranteed if it's an Apple, it doesn't. For sure, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay? But that's the plan. That's where they're heading, is to that sort of an idea. And I'll show you kind of what that looks like in just a second. It's like connecting to Wi-Fi. So you can do that scan, you can do the QR code thing like you do, here, if you want to connect to our guest network, you can scan and it'll go to the network. If you want to tap, you can use like an NFC tap. You can tap that and you'll automatically be connected. Okay? It's professional grade technology through consumer devices. So as opposed to Bluetooth, which is a Bluetooth technology that we're trying to shoehorn into a professional application, it is a professional technology that is leveraging technology that's in your personal Bluetooth or your personal device. Now, that's going to have some things that are going to come back to bite you, but we'll talk about that in a second. So this is an example of two manufacturers that are doing very, very well with this. Or Opus would be another one, but these two are the ones that we're hearing the most of by far. So Williams AV, same company that builds this, and Listen Technologies, that's this one right here. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Carl keeps saying Auracast, but this device says Ori on it. They branded it Ori. I don't know. Don't talk to me about it. It just seems weird, but that's what they did. So let's do a kind of a similar sort of a thing that we did earlier. Here's my belt pack that has been charging on my charging station right here. I pull out my belt pack. It's now on. And I'm going to try, hey, Jordan, we're going to try our same thing here. And I'm going to plug this in. And before I get started, I don't know, Logan, can we switch to this camera? And can we switch to the camera on the side? And hopefully we can see this. And I think we're going to need to switch to on the stream as well. Oh. We have the focus ability. Not so much. It's thinking about focus. All right, cool. All right, so the way that this works is when it boots up, I have the ability to scan. I do a scan on it, and in this case, because it's connected to this Aura transmitter, then I can select, in this case, we're going to call it Media Player.
What locals call the House of Bones. Gaze up at the facade, which resembles a lily-covered pond straight from the brush of Monet.
Pretty clean sound coming from this, and this is being transmitted from there, and we just have a small media player playing this sound. Okay, so it's pretty clean.
Just around the corner,
right?
is the last
And
private
obviously I'm pretty
residence
close
designed
here.
by Gaudí.
If you would like to test this when we're done, we can give you a pair of headphones and you can go for a walk in the building. And you can kind of get an idea as to what that looks like. So on the same device, I'm just going to, oops, there we go. Hey, look at that. So on the same device, I am now going to switch to what's labeled here as microphone because we're coming in on the microphone input.
Speech reinforcement sound systems. During World War I,
I'm going to go back to here. It's going to scan, find what other ones. I'm going to go back to my media player. So you can imagine if one of these was labeled French and one was labeled English. Kind of cool.
cool off amid
Right?
a forest of stone columns.
And again,
bending under the
no
world's
limit
weight.
to the number of devices that I can have connected to this. So that is the Auracast transmitter, and specifically that's the Ori one from Listen, but the technology basically works the same. So, any questions so far? Yes.
Do they play nice together?
Do they play nice together?
Like, can you use a transmitter from that on that, or is it not?
Good segue. All right. So I'm gonna come back to that in a second. So everybody loves to check out Amazon. We just went to Horizon Solutions. I wonder how much we can buy the same stuff at Amazon. Never happens. This is the pair of headphones that's on the right-hand side. I bought these with my Amazon Prime membership for, I think, $64, give or take, something like that. And they were delivered in less than 24 hours. And these headphones, which are from a company called, I guess it's supposed to be HomeSpot? I don't know. Anyway, they have this cool app. Logan, we're going to go back to this camera again. And I'm going to turn on the headphones. And let's see if we can make this work. All right, so I open this up. And it's automatically connected to the headphones because I've scanned them and paired them before. And so I'm going to click on scan. And it that quickly came up with reception, which is the device that's sitting over there, media player and microphone, exactly the same way as the ones that over there, it said microphone and media player. But you'll notice that this is showing me the Opus device. That one was not. So to answer your question, no. They do not play nicely together at this time. At this time, the manufacturers have decided, we're just going to lock this down and we're just going to play with our own toys. And that's the way we're going to do things. Now, that's with their receiver devices. But clearly, I can grab another pair of headphones from somebody who's just looking at Auracast broadcasts, and I can connect to it. So, Scott, I'm going to hand you that. So if you want to put, I don't think those are too loud. I think they should be pretty reasonable. So I'm going to go to the reception, and you should be hearing that, right? And then if I switch to media player, you should be hearing the lady talk about Barcelona, I think it is. All right. And then if I switch to microphone, then you're going to get that Don's favorite speech track. It's pretty cool, eh?
Yeah.
And it's pretty clean, and it's pretty fast.
Very.
Yeah. And one of the things is that I can tell you that we are finding in our experiments that the Opus device doesn't sound quite as good as the Listen device. And everybody's, of course, welcome to try this out after. Sorry, I clicked too many times. Is it going to connect now? But it's also not nearly in the same price point. It's in a different price point for sure. Okay? So that is how the Auracast piece works. Again, that is a pair of $64 headphones. Nothing crazy. However, like any of these things that you'd find online, there's the gotchas, right? So this is an Auracast transmitter that you can buy for like $75. We have not bought one. We didn't need to buy one because remember I said that we've been having these conversations with the folks from Western, the audiology department at Western. They have tried some of these because they wanted to know how would this work. And at the time, they were having a harder time getting their hands on a demo unit, which we set them up with a month or so ago. And so they started buying these to see how well do they work because they have clients who have hearing aids that are Auracast enabled. And they're saying, well, does it work? And they were getting very discouraged because it turns out that these things off Amazon for $80 or $60 or whatever they are have poor range, poor sound, and bad latency. And so they were getting very frustrated. They were thinking this isn't any good. We sent them one of these and they sent us a PO. because it's a completely different animal. Again, it's not the consumer implementation of a professional technology. This is the professional technology. But again, what I think is kind of cool about this is we're proving here that I can use the professional transmitter with the professional receiver and get great results, but I can also use the professional transmitter with the consumer receiver and still get good results. I worked on that graphic for a while. Do you want to see it again? I would not recommend doing that, okay? So coming back to Auracast really quickly, unlimited receivers, slight variation in latency depending on what receiver you're using, okay? But theoretically, we're down into the 30 milliseconds sort of range, which is pretty good, okay? Dante options for transmitter. This one doesn't, but there's a sister product to this where we can put Dante into it. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. It's essentially digital audio directly into here instead of analog audio. It also means that I can, again, this doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it, but it means that I can power this with PoE. So I can put this installed just like I'm installing an access point, a network access point. I can put those in my venue, and I'm just running one cable up to it to send both audio to it as well as power to it. So that's pretty cool. High quality, and I can do stereo streams. In this case, we're streaming 2 different streams to it. Again, that microphone stream and media stream. And we can have multiple transmitters that are cascaded together to get a pretty cool result. Okay. Not to overcomplicate this thing, but just to make sure that we're on the same page. I can use this the same way that I can use this with any of those accessories. So I can plug in regular headphones. I can plug in one of the inductive loops into this. I can plug in any of those types of things. So today, I can implement Auracast into my theater or church or school with the idea that people can still plug in with their headphones, or they can still use an inductive loop that they've put around their neck, right, to work with their T-Coil. Or I can plug in, whatever it might be that I need to use with that, with the idea that, in theory, tomorrow, that I can use the Auracast technology to be able to have anybody in the room hear what's going on. If you start doing some searches on what hearing aids have, and I already said you can do a search to see, does that hearing aid have a T-Coil? You can also do the same search and say, which hearing aids are Auracast enabled already? There is actually a significant number of hearing assist systems, hearing aids that have Auracast already there. So as much as you and I maybe aren't hearing the terminology Auracast on a daily basis when we're going into Best Buy or wherever, that technology is being baked in because that part of the world is buying into it very, very quickly. So I mentioned that your phone may not have it. What's interesting is that my 2.5-year-old Samsung Gallery S23, Galaxy S23, I can transmit Auracast with my phone. So I can send audio from my phone to those headphones. I can't send it to this because we already said this was kind of locked down to these transmitters. But I can use any headphones that are Auracast enabled to go from here, just like I can with Bluetooth, which is pretty cool. What we're all expecting is that I'll also be able to receive to this before too long. The general feeling is that Apple is not, if somebody from Apple is watching our live stream, they're welcome to let us know exactly what's going on. But the general impression throughout the industry is that Apple's already building Auracast into their devices as well, but they're not turning it on yet for whatever reason. And if you follow anything about Apple, they turn on things when there's money to be made, because what's the point not in waiting? And so maybe that's a next generation of AirPods, or maybe that's a something else that's coming. I don't know, haven't got a clue. But what I am saying is that the expectation is that when Apple one day somebody stands up and says, and now we're doing Auracast, then things are going to kind of open up pretty wide. If you watch some of the information that Bluetooth is presenting on their website specifically about Auracast, the way that they describe this is similar to the ways that we talked about the Wi-Fi stuff, right? I go into a restaurant, I go into the gym, I sit down, I pull up which Auracast I want to listen to for my earbuds, for my headphones, that kind of thing. They also talk about, in some of their examples, they talk about how if you're in the airport and you're waiting for your flight, then you can log in to listen to the hockey game that you're watching on TV while you're waiting for your flight. But you can also at the same time log into and listen to your gate that might be, down a ways. But you can listen to that, so if they call your name, then you can hear both at the same time. So the technology is evolving. There's some really cool things that they're doing. And the fact that they can do a lot of the best things about FM and a lot of the great things about Bluetooth, and they're able to kind of make this handshake between professional technology and consumer technology, it's pretty cool. It's pretty neat. So, there it is. So the question is what do you need to consider when you're thinking about a hearing assist system for accessibility in your venue? Well, first of all, you need to think about the demographic and the tech savviness. And yes, that actually is a word, and that's how you spell it. The tech savviness of the people who are actually using this technology in your space. And if you are in a position where most of the people in your space who might be using it have no interest in ever pulling out their phone, have no interest in doing any of those other types of things, then Wi-Fi may not be the way for them. If you have a large number of people who are using, they have T-Coils in their hearing aids, then maybe an inductive loop around the whole space, although it could cost a lot of money, it might be worthwhile putting that in. Because then people walk in, it's done, they walk out. You don't have to worry about batteries for belt packs. You don't have to worry about what happens when headphones go missing, when a belt pack ends up in the sink, that kind of thing. You don't need to worry about those things because the inductive loop is the whole piece. It's an expensive one-time expense they have to put in. So maybe that's something to think about. But maybe FM is going to hit your budget, or maybe Auracast is going to be partway in between. You have to think about your audience size. Doesn't matter. Again, if your audience size is big enough that it makes sense for you to, like for instance, a professional theater like the Grand Theater, 800 seats, if you could potentially have a special, maybe you're doing a special presentation or something, you could have anywhere between 20 to 400 people walk through the door who need to have assistive listening, then maybe a T-Coil or an inductive loop with using T-Coil makes a lot of sense, or maybe not. Okay. Legislation for your type of space. If you are a government-funded space, look it up. The government will tell you exactly what you have, including how much area within your space needs to be covered by an inductive loop. So you need to think about that. And that is written right into some legislation. Other thing to consider, how are people interacting in your space? Do you have multiple audio sources or one audio source? If you're doing an inductive loop, that's great for one group. Not necessarily great if you're doing translation. You want to think about that, right? If you're doing translation, then you're probably looking at one of the other technologies that we're talking about here today. Short interactions are ongoing. if somebody's just walking up, I keep saying they're going to pick up that Snickers bar. I don't remember the last time I bought a Snickers bar. If you're going to walk up and buy a Kit Kat, then maybe having something like this, a small inductive loop piece, makes a ton of sense. Maybe not, right? And there are other ways. There are options where you can pick up something and put it up against your ear, that kind of stuff. So there's different ways. But if it's short interactions versus somebody's going to sit down in your movie theater or sit down in your church for a period of time, then that's going to be a different type of technology. Does sound quality matter, and does privacy matter? Okay, think about that. That's going to have an impact on some of the technologies. I just mentioned that the government is telling you exactly what you need if you are a government-funded space in some ways. And government-funded these days can mean a lot of different things. It doesn't just mean that you work for the WSIB office. It could mean that you receive regular government funding through grants. And if you are going for an accessibility grant with the government, you may want to consider whether or not what you're doing actually meets their requirements. Right now, this is not actually law. Right now, this has been, it's a draft. It says right there, it's draft. It's expected to get posted in this winter, and then hopefully by next fall, boy, government moves fast. Hopefully by next fall, they're actually going to publish this, and this is going to be the rules. Go ahead and look this up. Accessibility.canada.ca. It's kind of interesting. It's not just about what we're talking about, of course, tonight. It's also talking about those other things we discussed earlier on about washrooms and signage, and they will tell you what size of signage you need to have for what distance people are looking at. Of course, that makes perfect sense. Somewhere it needed to be said. They've got that information in this document. So it's worth checking out. If you are watching online, then you can pause right here and take a look at it, or I think we're going to include these in our notes as well. All right, there you go. Covered a lot, pretty quick. Has anybody got any questions? Yes, sir.
Questions?
Yes, 2 questions.
First one you didn't really touch on, what's the privacy of the Aura? Can you just get into it with anything, or?
The privacy with Auracast. That's a good question. At this point, I have not done anything with Auracast that requires a password.
Latency between the Auracast and the transmitter, the Auracast and the headphones, or is it about the same?
So the question is there a difference in the Auracast receiver versus Auracast headphones, and do I notice any latency difference between the two? To be honest, I haven't actually tried that. That's something we can try here in a couple of minutes if you'd like, and you can kind of hold up both to your ears and see. I suspect there will be some level of latency difference, in part because this belt pack here is worth twice as much as those pair of headphones. There's a good chance that it's going to be different, but definitely there's going to be some potential there. But really, the latency is pretty low. And one of the things that's kind of cool about this demo kit that we have is here tonight is that we can plug a microphone in. Comes with a microphone, and we can count it off so that you can actually you can hear it yourself and decide what do you think about the latency for that. So certainly tonight, before you guys take off, after the people watching the live stream go to bed, you can try out some things before you take off tonight. Okay? Any other questions? No? All right. Any questions from the live stream? Jordan, any questions from over there?
It's a minute behind.
It's
It's going to take them literally a minute to respond.
it's a minute behind. All right. Okay. So, with that being said, thanks for coming tonight. It's good to have a good group of people here tonight. And just a couple of housekeeping things to let you know about. We have, this is the last of our regular seminars for this season. So for the 2025-26 season of seminars, this will be the last one for tonight. And we will be back at it again in September. We last year did our conference in June at the Grand Theater. We're not doing that this year. We're pretty busy, and so we're not going to be doing that this year. but we've had a lot of people ask, why not? So it's certainly something we'll be considering for next year. However, we do have our resource stage study hall, which we do specifically for teachers and for educators, and that will be coming up this Friday from 12:30 till 1:30, and that is actually specifically the lighting session, and then there's from 1:30 till 2:30, talking about kind of the basics of audio. This is really interesting. We talk to teachers all the time who don't have an opportunity to hear from anybody else on how do I just learn about the basics so that I can put on a show for my school. And we've had some really good success with this, and we're going to keep doing it. So that is the final resource stage stuff for this year. And then we also have, if you haven't been there recently, we also have a website that we've spent a bunch of time working on over the last couple of years. And not only does it have a bunch of information about what we do and about the kinds of things about how we do it, but it also has a whole section on there where you can purchase some of the things that we sell. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, we're not looking to be Amazon. That's not our goal. Not at all. Our goal is actually to be able to provide some very specific things that we sell to our clients. So if you find something on there, it's probably because we've picked that and we've said this is a technology or this is a microphone or this is a specific light or whatever it is that we really like, and that's why it is that we've mentioned it there. The other thing to keep in mind is that we sell actually quite a few pieces of consumables to people across Canada from our website. So whether that is spike tape or bubble fluid for your bubble effects machine, or fog fluid, or paint for shows, that kind of thing. We sell a lot of that, lighting gels, bulbs, all that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of that on the site, as well as we have a rental. All of our rental inventory can be found online. So if you're ever wondering, if you're saying, hey, you know what, we need a extra set of wireless microphones for this special event we're doing, or it would be really cool to have some lighting for our event that's coming up, you can find that sort of thing there. And pretty much all of our inventory is on there. Certainly if you've got any questions or if you don't find something, then let us know, because sometimes we have some other things kicking around. All right, there you go. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Again, you're welcome to stick around and check out any of this, and have a good night. Thank you.